Why is it so difficult for these companies to understand the simplicity of things? If you make a good product and you don't preach down to your audience and tell them how terrible they are, they will support you. If you don't preach, if you don't pander, if you don't project, then you can be successful.
This is one of the biggest memes in the gaming community, that gamers are oppressed, like they're some sort of minority. And it sounds like totally ridiculous, and it is ridiculous. And even for a while researching this, I was like, is this actually like a thing? Like in my head, I have a view of people who feel like they're victims because they're gamers. And I'm going to get into that sort of mindset that is common through online gaming communities. But then I actually did find stuff that was talking about being sort of discriminated against for being a gamer. And you know that like really famous copy pasta, like they targeted gamers? This isn't like satire. That was a totally real comment. And I went on the profile that wrote it, and looking at their other posts, it's, you know, really clear they meant it. So today we're going to talk about why gamers think they're discriminated against or oppressed. And you guys may pretty much be able to guess. A lot of it has to do with Gamergate style things, where the community is being attacked by outside forces, journalists, academics, the woke mob, who are trying to ruin video games just for like woke brownie points, and they don't actually care about the games. Or they can be like creators of various games who ruin the games for the sole purpose of pushing social justice. I'm going to plug my social media and Patreon for about a minute, so skip this stuff if you're not interested. But before we get any further, a lot of my work on this channel is demonetized because when you're covering more serious, sometimes edgier topics, YouTube doesn't like this. So if you've ever enjoyed my work, please consider becoming a patron. And you don't have to pledge a crazy amount. I want to build up my Patreon based on as many people as possible, pledging little amounts like $1 or $2. So if you feel like I have ever brought anything that's worthwhile into your life and my content, please really consider becoming a patron to help me continue to do this regardless of if YouTube monetize or not most of my videos in a given month. Also, if you want to join our communities, come check out our Discord and my subreddit. Those links in the description. And if you want to follow me personally, please check out the Kavernacle at Twitter, at Instagram, and also my personal Reddit, where you can keep up to date with all my content and what I'm doing. Thanks so much for 35k. If you missed it last video, I finally built this lovely pyramid, and for every 5k we get a new chocolate orange. Help me build it even further. Also, I usually live stream every Tuesday and Thursday. I'm not doing it this week or next week because I'm going away, but that stuff is all archived on the Kavernacle Extra. So I referenced this famous copy pasta, which I thought was just satire, and it turns out it wasn't. So there's a really fun subreddit called Kotaku in Action, which is the place where like Gamergaters go to complain about woke politics in the gaming community. I wonder if I have featured there before. Anyway, 5 years ago, they shared a video of Christina Hoff Sommers, who is doing an interview with Bill Crystal. And she said that feminists did it to scientists, they did it to sports. The gamers were the first group that really fought back. They liked to win. They were not the right group to pick a fight with.
What happened was, this celebrating women is that a group of cultural critics, the sort of people who've been marching through our universities, gender studies or cultural studies majors, set their sights on, well, they chose the wrong crowd. They chose the gamers. And gamers know a thing or two about, they like to win. And they started an argument with them and said that your games are sexist and misogynist, and you have women are irresponsibly proportioned. Now, it is mostly guys who play the game. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them like sexy women, so there's sexy women in them. They'll say, well, there's violence to women. Well, there's vastly more violence to men, and you usually get punished if there's violence to women. And if there's violence to women at all, it's usually gives a motive to the protagonist to go on, and take revenge or something, because there are these. So it's an innocent pursuit, and they're having fun. And now they're getting these, gender studies majors telling them your games are, treating women as the other. And
okay, so, gamers just like to have fun. Gamers didn't want this politics. They just wanted to, play the games and enjoy themselves. Now, the top comment, of course, now is this copy pasta, but I'm going to read it for you. Maybe I'll have some guest speakers read some of it as well, but here we go. S. Silversmith. They targeted gamers. Gamers. We're a group of people who will sit for hours, days, even weeks on end performing some of the hardest, most mentally demanding tasks, over and over and over, all for nothing more than a little digital token saying we did. We'll punish ourselves doing things others would consider torture, because we think it's fun. We'll spend most, if not all, our free time min-maxing the stats of a fictional character, all to draw out a single extra point of damage per second. Many of us have made careers out of doing just these things, slogging through the grind, all day, the same quests over and over, hundreds of times to the point where we know every little detail such that some have attained such gamer nirvana that they can literally play these games blindfolded.
Do these people have any idea how many controllers have been smashed? Systems overheated, disks and cards destroyed in frustration, all to later be referred to as bragging rights. These people honestly think this is a battle they can win. They take our measure. We are already building a new one without them. They take our devs. Gamers aren't shy about throwing their money elsewhere, or even making the games ourselves.
They think calling us racist, misogynistic apologists is going to change us. We've been called worse things by prepubescent 10-year-olds with a shitty headset. They picked a fight against a group that's already grown desensitized to their strategies and methods, who enjoy the battle of attrition they threaten us with, who take it as a challenge when they tell us we no longer matter. Our obsession with proving we can after being told we can't is so deeply ingrained from years of dealing with big brothers and sisters and friends laughing at how pathetic we used to be, that proving you people wrong has become a very real need, a Hun reflex.
Gamers are competitive, hardcore by nature. We love a challenge. The worst thing you did in all of this was challenge us. You're not special. You're not original. You're not the first. This is just another boss fight. How is that not satire? How is that not satire? And I'm going to prove it's not satire. So you guys can check this out for yourself. This guy is called S. Silversmith. So he's posted another thing on Kotaku in Action. So one post he has about 5 years ago, about the same time as his comment, is called Tropes versus Women, the arbitrary erasure of depth and assassination of content. So it goes down to say, when talking about girls like Tifa and Bayonetta, it says, we see these girls and women from comics, games, TV shows, movies and cartoons. Regardless if they're moral, immoral or amoral, they're all extremely powerful, deadly, beautiful and inspiring in their own individual ways, with reasons, backgrounds and oftentimes extremely detailed stories explaining who they are and why they are the way they are. Many of these characters are deeply complicated, with personal convictions, demons and inner turmoil. Enthusiasts of whatever genre they come from can prattle off a list of detailed objective reasons why they like or don't like these characters. Their dedicated fans can talk until they're blue in the face about how awesome they are. Aficionados can give you 1,000 reasons why they're good or bad characters and cite their sources. But when it comes to feminists, SJWs in particular, the only thing they notice is a character's gender, clothing or body, even when sex and sensuality are a driving force behind the character. Why should that even matter? Why would you claim to be pro-women and pro-representation, then erase everything that makes these characters interesting, likeable, laudable, admirable, and sometimes relatable because you don't like the way they're dressed or the way they walk? When you erase everything that makes a character what and who they are because you don't like how they look on the surface, there's a word for that. I'm not going to say it. You already know what it is. He has a lot of comments like that, not many posts, but this guy is clearly not joking. Don't really need to respond to his comment about women there and why women have a problem with how much female characters are objectified in video games in general. But he's basically whining people complaining about objectified women is erasing their characters as well. Not that you can have great female characters who aren't objectified. Of course, it's changing a bit more now, but we're going to go back to this sort of stuff because this rhetoric he's talking about in both things can apply to so much you see in anti-SJW circles these days. Now, I just want to get to one more comment to show that, like, maybe gamers thinking they're discriminated against is, like, more common than I thought. Another Kotaku in Action sub. Now, this place is a goldmine for this stuff. Someone says, an interesting take on the alleged exclusion of females from nerd spaces. Now, a deleted account writes this, and you guys will like this one. Well, isn't it obvious? SJWs are constantly talking about toxic masculinity, and the stereotypes they attack are ones more associated with jocks. It isn't nerds who wander the hallways hitting on every blonde and acting like they own women, but they aren't attacking jocks, are they? The NFL and major sports leagues don't get a mention from feminists. Gaming is the supposedly easy target because, to use a naughty word, gamers are less privileged. On the social scale, they tend to be more poor. Video games, despite seeming expensive, are truly a cheaper alternative to sports music and other hobbies. Especially in the teen years, they seriously aren't. They don't fit into the mainstream, they don't hold true power. For years, the nerds, the scientists, the engineers, the gamers, they were hidden in the background. The celebrities were always beautiful athletes, actors and musicians. What's happening now? Gaming is becoming cool. Science is becoming cool. Nerds are coming to the forefront, and they are true nerds. We can't have that, can we? So the mainstream has to hijack it, turn it into something for them. They tried doing it in their typical way, by capitalising and dressing it up, but the nerds didn't go away. They embraced that shit. So now, turn them into the enemy. It's high school, and SJWs truly have that mentality, so it's no surprise. To SJWs, everything is a clique. Everything must be categorised, and anything that doesn't fit neatly into a category is the worst of the worst. Any woman who isn't a feminist is a witch. Any minority who doesn't agree with them is a traitor. I really hate the film Divergent, but this is basically what we're dealing with. A society which doesn't want anyone to break its carefully constructed norms. And the most hilarious thing, there are some SJWs who truly are for social justice, actual social justice. Who knows, historically it was minorities, by race, sexuality and immigration, who were discriminated against for not bowing to the norms. Yet they don't see the exact same thing happen in front of them, this time based on class and social status. And the SJWs pulling the strings will say, gamers are not a discriminated class. Why not? Oppression takes many forms. Gamers and nerds have been stereotyped so heavily, taken severe shots to self-esteem. Nerds are discredited throughout all of society. Expect those circles where they belong. And those circles receive little public recognition or value despite their accomplishments, creating the foundation for the modern world. And this is fairly normal. Pre-technical age, the nerds were the authors and inventors, the majority social recluses who lost out to the more popular folks. Why is Tesla so beloved in nerd circles? Because he's a proto-nerd, a quiet but brilliant guy, who had credit for his amazing ideas stolen by what amounted to a revolutionary era jock taken for profit. Nerds have finally found their moment, and just like throughout all history, that elite will do anything to stop it. They will use the media to paint them as evil. They will convince otherwise reasonable people to side with them. They will steal what they value and use it for themselves to take the credit, and they will do so all while pretending they are the heroes of the story. So there we go. Maybe I shouldn't have thought that gamers are oppressed is a meme. And to respond to this guy, it's pretty ridiculous to say that, gamers are from, poorer backgrounds. Because video games historically have been very, very expensive. They used to be insanely expensive, completely unaffordable back in the 90s and stuff. They've gotten more affordable, more accessible as time has got on, which has actually allowed lots of, poorer people to gain access to them. Now, like I said, he's trying to compare gamers to, people from the LGBT community or minorities in the US and say that, they're demonized by the media. And that is something I'm going to come back to. Because what's a through line through these oppression things is that it's the elite and the media trying to ruin games from the outside with social justice. I think these guys often tell themselves because to be a gamer, you don't have to be some introverted nerd who just plays video games 24/7, doesn't have a personality outside of video games, doesn't like anything else, and is basically a loser. And that is a really old stereotype of gamers from back in the day, but it's really not applicable to people, I think, in the last 20 years. For example, I absolutely love video games. I own most of the consoles. I don't play as much as I want to anymore because I'm too busy, but I wouldn't call myself a gamer as an identifying thing. I'm not a gamer. It's something I enjoy. I like video games. And I'm also not the traditional nerd. I absolutely love sports. I love, I'm wearing a football shirt. I love football. I play football. I've played it at a pretty good level, and I love watching football, and I love doing this stuff, but I also love video games. I'm not just a nerd. To this guy, I'm probably a jock, but I love both of them. I love football and I love video games. And speaking to the football angle, loads of footballers, soccer players, love video games, absolutely love it. And these guys are often from a multitude of backgrounds, poor backgrounds, and more middle-class backgrounds, especially the American players, because of the way the league is structured there. So there is a massive crossover now. Everyone likes video games. Everyone plays video games. Pretty much everyone I know plays video games. As millennials are getting older, gaming is just increasingly common through all age ranges. So when Donald Trump comes out and uses like early 2000 arguments to say that violence in America is caused by video games, he's like widely criticized. It's not like the early 2000s where there was hysteria about Grand Theft Auto. Now people are just like, you're being ridiculous. If we were talking about like 2003 or something, I'd understand it a tiny bit more because there's a stereotype about being like a nerd. You had political fear-mongering about what video games would do to children if you let them play it. So I understand back then there was a certain stereotype about people play games. There isn't that stereotype today. It's literally one of the most profitable mediums of art, played by so many people, absolutely massive, and everyone plays it. But let's touch on these oppression arguments, like why these guys are discriminated against, why they feel like they're discriminated against. So with video games, you basically have two countries developing games to start with, major countries. You have America and Japan. So you have gaming cultures, really growing early in both these countries. But I think the American gaming culture is what we need to focus on, and Western gaming culture. I don't think the Japanese stuff really factors into what I'm talking about today. And with the American game culture, yeah, I guess you had to be more nerdy and you had to be more tech savvy to enjoy these things. And, contrary to what this guy's saying, you probably did need a bit more disposable income because games were so expensive. You also needed parents who knew about this stuff as well often. But the medium in America was started by white Westerners, white English speakers. And the industry stayed that way for a long time. And also, like, the audience for this stuff was often white men as well to start with. Now, as the medium grew and as the audience grew, it became more diverse. And in the 2010s, you see a massive push for more diversity, more, women in positions of leadership, more female, protagonists who aren't as objectified. And then you have games being treated more like art. And that is where, the more, critical arguments come in of how people are represented in video games as this increasingly popular medium. Now, this culminated in Gamergate, which was a lot of things. I've actually made a whole video on this stuff. But basically it boiled down to what they said was ethics in games journalism and this, menace of social justice taking over games journalism and the games industry to demonize white straight men and to push diversity for diversity's sake.
This quest for equality and diversity wasn't a highly publicized issue until just a few years ago. It wasn't an issue until it was made an issue, until gaming itself was attacked.
And gaming changed because of this, according to them, and that the woke corporations, because let's not forget, these guys think corporations are woke, bowed down to the SJWs and started pandering to them to the detriment of the real gamers.
Don't preach down to your audience and tell them how terrible they are. They will support you. If you don't preach, if you don't pander, if you don't project.
The industry no longer cared about the real gamers. They no longer made games for the real gamers. A lot of them only made games for social justice and to pander to feminists who wouldn't even play their games just to make themselves look better. Ridiculous logic. Video game fans felt like they had some sort of ownership. It's like, we made you, we can break you. And you would have heard this from people like The Quartering. Get woke, go broke is their saying. Doesn't seem to happen too much, but they think that is what happens. Now, this sort of mentality really reared its head during The Last of Us Part 2 controversy. So spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2, in that the game contained a trans character. The game contained a fairly muscular woman called Abby. The game also made you play as Abby, and Abby was the person who killed Joel Miller, the protagonist of the first game, who was a fan favorite. And many gamers felt betrayed. They're like, we made you. We made The Last of Us. You're betraying the fans. I'm not going to buy this. All you care about now, The Last of Us, is woke politics and feminism and SJWs. Because Neil Druckmann said he liked Anita Sarkeesian, she single-handedly ruined your favourite game series. And they say this stuff like get woke, go broke about The Last of Us Part 2, did insanely well with critics, and it did insanely well with audiences, sold a lot of copies. But this is something we need to hone in on, is the Gamergate mentality. And although a lot of gamers today probably weren't even old enough to remember Gamergate, there is a whole industry now of nerd media that capitalizes on being anti-SJW. And if you watch my content, I've made loads of videos on this. And it's basically anything that is fairly progressive is these guys ruining stuff. And it's outside forces, like this oppressed gamer said in the Reddit thread. It's the elite. It's trying to demonize these people. You introduce more diversity, and if they don't like it, it means they're a bigot, or it means they're a misogynist. And that was what Gamergate was all about. They're trying to say, no, we're not misogynist, we're just for ethics and games journalism, and we want games for the gamers TM. We don't want social justice propaganda.
I made a video entitled, A Game Developer's Open Letter to Anita Sarkeesian. At the time, I hoped that Ms. Sarkeesian was sincere in her expressed love for video games, and that she was genuinely hoping to spark a discussion about the portrayal of women in them. As a lifelong gamer and developer with a couple decades of professional experience, I offered to engage with her in a respectful dialogue regarding any of the topics she had raised in her Tropes vs. Women series. I noted that she had since clarified her position regarding video games when she said in a published article that it's never been about video games, it's always about social justice.
And that stuff, geeks and gamers, quartering, all these other people talk non-stop about. So in their mind, the game companies that used to love them have gone further and further away from just trying to please them by making good games. And a group like CD Projekt Red, a company like CD Projekt Red, they really capitalized on this sentiment with The Witcher 3. Like, here's free DLC, here's our edgy marketing, where we make, helicopter identity jokes and stuff like that. And that's why it was funny to see the implosion when Cyberpunk was such a mess, and all these gamers who harassed journalists who gave Cyberpunk a bad review finally realised this company wasn't really on their side and it was just a marketing thing. But they also think that about a lot of companies. I think a lot of companies have had to abandon them because of social justice. Now, what I find pretty hilarious is that the people who complain about gamers being discriminated against or oppressed are the same people who actually give gamers in general like a really negative stereotype. So these are the guys complaining about social justice. These are the guys complaining about diversity and, video game companies stopping sexualizing women just for like the male gaze. These are the guys complaining about this stuff. Do they not realize that they're giving themselves an awful reputation? Do they not realize, channels like Geeks and Gamers and people who follow Kotaku in Action and who are Anti-SJWs, do they not realize people think gamers are often like bigoted because of people like you? People view online gaming communities a certain way because of how toxic you are. And then for people like that to cry about it without any irony is ridiculous. And that's why anti-SJW YouTubers have found such a good grift. Complain about anything. Loki is bisexual, make a couple videos on that. Boba Fett's ship is no longer called the Slave One, make a couple videos on that. Make loads of these videos, and whether or not these guys actually believe in it themselves, that is up for debate, but it can't be understated that these channels are immensely popular, and all the comments are flooded with people who do believe these things. They are gamers who think their hobby is being ruined by left-wing people, is being ruined by woke corporations who only care about diversity, don't care about profits anymore. Even though not all of them would say they are oppressed like a minority, a lot of them would say that gamers are being manipulated and taken for granted, and a lot of them would identify as a gamer, like primarily. They are a gamer. And not in the way that like you play video games, in that it is your personality as a gamer, and that is what you care about most. And they still think it's some sort of like underground culture, despite being one of the most popular things on earth. They think it's still like the late 1990s or early 2000s, where there is like political fear-mongering about video games and how it affects the gamers. But nowadays their oppression is just because they're bigots and don't like diversity or representation. They don't like more people who aren't white straight men controlling the narratives of these games or controlling the industry. They don't like the presence of more minorities, be that, racial and ethnic or sexual. And genuinely, some of them think they are oppressed. And it's just funny and ridiculous, but also really, really sad. So anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you want to follow me on social media, at the Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to join our communities, Discord and my subreddit, that is in the description. If you want to support my work, check out my Patreon. And if you made it this far, thank you all for watching.